Today we will learn about femur. We know that femur is the bone of the thigh. It is a long bone. It has upper end, shaft and lower end. The upper end, the head of this articulate with the acetabulum of the hip bone to form the hip joint. The lower end, below, it articulates with the condyles of the tibia and in front with the patella and form the knee joint. The upper ends are separated by the pelvis, so they are away from each other. The shaft is going downward obliquely medially, so that the two lower ends are nearer to each other as compared to upper ends. The femur is the longest and strongest bone of the body. It is about 45 centimeter long in an average man. That means approximately 1/4 of the height of individual. Femur is a long bone. It has upper end, shaft and lower end. Now we will go to side determination. The upper end, it has rounded head. The lower end is expanded to form two condyles. The shaft, it has convexity directed anteriorly. When we see it from side view, we can see that it is convex forward. So, we can say that this is the femur of left side. Now, anatomical position. In anatomical position, head is directed upward, medially and slightly forward. The shaft is directed obliquely downward and medially, so that the lower surface of the condyles lie in the same horizontal plane. For showing anatomical position, we can hold the femur like this way, so that shaft is directed obliquely downward and medially, and both the condyles lie in the same horizontal plane. Now we will learn about general features of upper end. The upper end of the femur includes head, constricted neck, then greater trochanter and lesser trochanter, then intertrochanteric line and posteriorly intertrochanteric crest. Head forms 2/3 of the sphere. It is directed medially, upward and slightly forward. It articulates with the acetabulum of hip bone to form hip joint. The roughened pit is situated slightly below and behind the center of the head. This pit is also known as fovea capitis. The neck, it connects the head with the shaft. It is about 5 centimeter long. It is directed upward, medially and slightly forward, and it makes the angle with the shaft. This angle between axis of neck and shaft is known as neck shaft angle. It is about 125 degree in adult. It is slightly lesser in female because of wider pelvis. And in children,
this angle is about 160 degree. This elongated neck and neck shaft angle allows the lower limb to swing clearly away from the pelvis. Now we know that the weight transmits from the hip joint to femur. So weight from acetabulum goes to head of the femur, from head to neck, and from the neck to shaft. So to overcome this bending force, inner aspect of the neck is having a strong bony buttress which is called calcar femoral. The neck has two border and two surfaces. This is the upper border, this is lower border, anterior surface and posterior surface. Here you can see this is the posterior surface. The upper border is concave and horizontal and meet the shaft at the greater trochanter. The lower border, it is oblique and straight and it meets the shaft near the lesser trochanter. Anterior surface, it is flat and it meets the shaft at intertrochanteric line. This surface is entirely intracapsular. On this aspect, you can see number of oblique ridges are there. These bony ridges are found to affect the anterior surface of the neck for the attachment of retinacular fibers of fibrous capsule. Now we will learn about posterior surface of neck. This is the posterior surface of neck. It is convex from above downward and concave from side to side. It meets the shaft at intertrochanteric crest. This is the intertrochanteric crest. Only a little more than a half of this surface is intracapsular. This posterior surface shows the presence of faint groove which leads to this trochanteric fossa. This groove, it is directed upward and laterally and it lodges the tendon of obturator externus separated by a bursa. Greater trochanter. It is a large quadrangular prominence at the upper part of the junction of neck with the shaft. This greater trochanter has three surfaces: the anterior surface, lateral surface and medial surface, and two borders, the upper border and posterior border. This is the apex. Apex, it is the interned end of posterior end of the upper border. Here you can see the posterior end of this upper border, it is interned, and this is the apex. Now the posterior border. This posterior border is continuous with the intertrochanteric crest. Now we will learn about the surfaces of the greater trochanter. This is the anterior surface. It has rough lateral part. Then lateral surface, it is quadrangular. Here you can see this is the quadrangular lateral surface. It is divided by the oblique ridge which is going downward and forward into two triangular area. Now, medial surface of greater trochanter. It shows the presence of trochanteric fossa. Here, the tendon of obturator externus comes and inserted here. Just above and in front of the trochanteric fossa, you can see the rough impression. The lesser trochanter. It is the conical eminence directed medially and backward from the junction of posterior-inferior part of the neck with the shaft. So this is the lesser trochanter. Both the trochanters are example of traction epiphysis. Intertrochanteric line. It marks the junction between the anterior surface of the neck with the shaft of the femur. It is the prominent ridge extend from the greater trochanter and it continues below with the spiral line. Here you can see it continues below with the spiral line in front of lesser trochanter. This is the spiral line. This spiral line winds around the shaft below the lesser trochanter and reach the posterior surface of the shaft. So, this is the spiral line, wind round the shaft and reaching the posterior surface of shaft. Now, intertrochanteric crest. You know that intertrochanteric crest, it is the smooth rounded ridge which marks the junction of posterior surface of neck with the shaft. It extends from the superior angle of the greater trochanter to the lesser trochanter. Here we can see this is the intertrochanteric crest extending between posterior-superior angle of greater trochanter to the lesser trochanter. Just above the middle of this crest, you can see a rounded elevation. This rounded elevation is quadrate tubercle. Now, we will learn about shaft. Shaft, it is cylindrical and it is convex forward. We can easily see this convexity when we see that the bone is in from the side view. Here you can easily appreciate that the shaft is convex forward. The middle one third of the shaft is the narrowest portion of the shaft. It has 3 borders and 3 surfaces. The medial border, lateral border, they both are ill-defined, and this is the posterior border. Now, surfaces. Between the posterior border and lateral border, this is the lateral surface. Between the posterior border and medial border, this is the medial surface. And now, anterior surface. This is the anterior surface which lies between medial and lateral border. Here we can see this is the linea aspera. It is the prominent ridge. In the middle one third of the shaft, it acts as a bony buttress to resist the compressive forces for the anterior bowing of bone. Linea aspera presents medial border, lateral lip and intermediate area. When we trace upward, the 2 lips diverges and enclose a triangular posterior surface in upper one third of shaft. Here you can see these two lips are diverging and enclose this triangular area in the posterior one third of shaft. When we trace upward, this medial lip continues with this spiral line. Here you can see this is the spiral line, and this spiral line, when we trace upward, it continues with this anterior intertrochanteric line. Okay, so this is the spiral line. When we trace lateral lip upward, it continues with broad rough ridge on the lateral part of the posterior surface. This broad rough ridge is known as gluteal tuberosity. So, medial lip will continues with the spiral line, and lateral lip is continuous with this lateral lip of gluteal tuberosity. So, in the upper one third of the shaft has 4 borders and 4 surfaces. We can see 4 borders: medial border, lateral border, then lateral lip of gluteal tuberosity and spiral line. Between these 4 borders, 4 surfaces are there. The posterior surface lying between spiral line and gluteal tuberosity, then lateral surface, medial surface and anterior surface. Now when we examine the lower one third of the shaft, we can see that the 2 lips of linea aspera diverges and encloses the triangular surface which is known as popliteal surface, which lies on the posterior aspect of the lower one third of the shaft. Here we can see that this lateral lip of linea aspera diverges and continue with this lateral supracondylar ridge. Medial lip diverges and continues with this medial supracondylar ridge. When we trace this medial supracondylar ridge downward, we can see that there is a tubercle. This tubercle is known as adductor tubercle. So, this part of the shaft has 4 borders and 4 surfaces. The 4 borders are lateral supracondylar ridge, medial supracondylar ridge, medial border and lateral border, and 4 surfaces are anterior surface, medial surface, lateral surface and posterior surface, or we can say popliteal surface. Now we can see that the medial border and medial supracondylar ridge meet inferiorly and obliterate the medial surface. Similarly, lateral supracondylar ridge and lateral border meet inferiorly and obliterate this lateral surface inferiorly. Now, lower end of femur. It is enlarged to form 2 condyles. This is medial condyle and this is lateral condyle. Anteriorly, both these condyles are united and in line with the front of the shaft. Posteriorly, both the condyles projects backward and are separated by intercondylar fossa, or we can say intercondylar notch. In this aspect, they are much beyond the popliteal fossa.
in this side view, we can see that anteriorly these condyles are in line with the anterior aspect of the shaft, and posteriorly they are extended much beyond the popliteal surface. Now we will see the articular surface. The articular surface is V-shaped. It affects the anterior surface of both the condyle, inferior surface and posterior surface of both the condyle. Here we can see this V-shaped articular surface. The apex of V is known as patellar surface, which occupies the anterior surface of both the condyles. It articulates with the patella. Here you can see this surface articulates with this patella. Rest of the articular surface, it is known as tibial surface, which covers the inferior aspect and posterior aspect of both the condyles. So this is the tibial surface. Here we can see this is a medial condyle and this is a lateral condyle. The lateral condyle, it is flat laterally. It is more in line with the shaft, so that it takes greater part in the weight transmission of the body to the tibia. It is less prominent than the medial condyle, but it is stouter and stronger. When we see the outer surface of the lateral condyle, the most prominent point is known as lateral epicondyle. There is a groove below this lateral epicondyle. This groove is popliteal groove, and it is deeper in anterior part and shallower in the posterior part. Here we can see this is the popliteal groove below the lateral epicondyle. Posterior superior to this lateral epicondyle, here we can see the depression. This is a muscular impression which lies posterior superior to this lateral epicondyle. This is the medial condyle. It is convex medially. The most prominent point of this surface, it is the medial epicondyle. So this is the medial epicondyle. Posterior superior to this medial epicondyle, again there is a elevation. This is known as adductor tubercle, which lies posterior superior to this medial epicondyle. When we trace this medial supracondylar ridge downward, at its lower end we can find this adductor tubercle. This is the important bony landmark for surface anatomy. The epiphyseal line of lower end passes through this adductor tubercle. It receives the insertion of tendon of hamstring part of the adductor magnus. So it is important. Now intercondylar fossa or intercondylar notch. It separates the lower and posterior part of the two condyles. It has medial wall, lateral wall and floor. It is limited anteriorly by the patellar articular surface and posteriorly by this intercondylar line. This intercondylar line separates the notch from the popliteal surface. This lower end of the femur and head of the femur are the example of pressor epiphysis. Now nutrient foramen. When we see the posterior aspect of the shaft, on the medial side of linea aspera, we can see the nutrient foramen. this nutrient foramen, it is directed upward. So the lower end is the growing end. The nutrient artery is the second perforating artery, which is the branch of profunda femoris.
Now we have seen this femur from the superior view. We have keep it in the anatomical position. In this anatomical position, we know that the head and neck of the femur are directed slightly forward. So it makes an angle of anteversion, or we can say angle of femoral torsion. When we draw the imaginary line passing through upper end and one another imaginary line passing through the lower end of the femur, we put it together, they meet these two lines, they meet with each other at an angle of 15 degree. This angle is angle of anteversion or angle of femoral torsion.